All right, everybody, it's about 6:01, so we're going to get started. Welcome to our public information meeting tonight for the Hazardous Waste Management Facility Operating License Renewal and Expansion application for DLD Environmental Services. I'm glad you could be here tonight. We got a few people on, kind of a small group of people on tonight. Hopefully we'll have a few more join us. My name is Jim Ostrowski, and I work in Eagle's Environmental Support Division. I'll be helping moderate tonight's session and hanging out in the background. Before I turn it over to Jeremy and the team, I'm just going to go over a couple logistical details. First of all the lines are muted for right now. When we get to the Q&A part, I'll explain how to ask questions if you want. If you do have a question during the presentation or after, you can type it into the Q&A box on your Zoom toolbar. We'll be going over questions at the end. We're also recording this public information session, just like we do with all of our public meetings, and we'll be putting it up on our YouTube channel in the next couple of days. So everyone who registered for this public meeting will be getting an email from us with a link to the recording in case they didn't attend tonight and missed it or want to forward it on to someone else they know of. I just want to also point you to the chat. We will be sending out some links tonight that might help you out. So if you do, you can check out the chat and keep an eye on that because we'll be sending out links, like I said. So right now I'm going to turn over to Jeremy, and he's going to introduce himself as well as the team that he's got with him here tonight from Eagle. So go ahead, Jeremy.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jeremy Pepin. I'm the permitting engineer for this facility. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to provide an overview of DLD's hazardous waste operations, go over an outline of the operating license renewal and expansion process, and then give anyone who has questions time to ask them. With me tonight, we have Rich Conforti, the Engineering and Project Support Unit Manager. The other staff of the project team, Mark Messina, who is the geologist, and Sean Shields, the Environmental Quality Specialist. And then we also have Krista Hedish and Wade O'Boyle, who are district staff and compliance inspectors assigned to DLD. For an agenda, we'll be going over Eagle's regulatory authority for managing hazardous waste in Michigan, a quick description of DLD's current facility and their proposed expansions, the license requirements for hazardous waste operating licenses, the renewal and expansion process for them, a compliance summary and licensing history for DLD, and then wrap up with some questions. So, Michigan receives delegation from the United States Environmental Protection Agency to run the National Hazardous Waste Management Program, also referred to as Subtitle C of the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, as well as applies for and receives authorization from the US EPA to run an equivalent or more stringent hazardous waste management program in Michigan. This is called Part 111 and consists of rules and statute that allow us to track hazardous waste from its point of generation all the way to its final point of disposal. And we consider this our cradle to grave regulation program. I will now pass it to Wade to talk about DLD.
Hi, everyone. I'm the hazardous waste inspector that visits Drug and Lab on a quarterly basis. Drug and Lab, as Jeremy said, it's a treatment, storage, and disposal facility, which means hazardous waste from all over is shipped to Drug and Lab, where they either treat it or ship it on to other places that will dispose or treat hazardous waste. So the location, facility description side of this is Drug and Lab is located at 331 Broad Street in Plainwell. And so there's an image on here that's sort of a close-up. In general terms, it's near Plainwell. That's the city. It's about a mile east of 131. And in terms of major other landmarks, it's about a quarter mile north of Bridge Street in town, or as a state highway, M89, M43. And then it's also about a mile or about a quarter mile east of the Kalamazoo River. So that's the general location. The up close streets that it's on, it's bordered by East Bridge and Acorn Street. And it's a treatment, storage, and disposal facility. Next slide, Jeremy. So the facility has several different treatment areas, and you can see there's sort of a map overlay. The top image is sort of the aerial view, and then the bottom image is where is sort of a blockaded out area of what each area within the facility is. And Drug and Lab, the nomenclature they use to name each of the different rooms is they use the prefix DLS1, DLS2, DLS3, DLS4, DLS5, and those are basically just a way to name each of the different rooms. And so in this slide, our bullets on the left, DLS1, DLS2, DLS5, those are all just processing and container storage. DLS3 has both tank and container storage. DLS is just tank storage. And we'll go through each room later. So if you haven't kept track of those, each room will pull out by room. And then the last bullet is the hazardous waste loading bay area. So after we get done with this slide, we'll go and break out each room and explain some of the functions in those rooms. So Jeremy, next slide. So this is DLS1. This is the first room that with the nomenclature. And so DLS1 is used for PCB waste storage, infectious materials. It's used for storing radioactive materials or mixed wastes and pre-processing temperature adjustments. So some of the explanations along the way on that is, so PCB waste is actually regulated by the EPA under a TSCA, so Toxic Substance Materials Act. So that's an EPA program that Drug and Lab separately from Eagle obtains credentials and permits and the ability to manage PCB wastes on site. The radioactive materials, sometimes in our common lives, we see radioactive materials in things like exit signs on buildings. And so that's kind of the type of things that you will find in that particular room. And then the pre-processing temperature adjustments. Drug and Lab is an open type building. So it can get cold in the winter or it can get warm in the summer. And on the cold end, anything with water can freeze. So sometimes Drug and Lab will pull drums or containers in that room so that they don't freeze, so that they can be transferred from one type of container to another, or keep them at a temperature range that is suitable for that type of material. Kind of the trend on this is that each area, so in this case it's DLS1, each area has a maximum amount of waste that can be stored in that area. And so this area is 2,860 gallons. And mind you, those gallons can be in any type of container, 5-gallon buckets. They can be in 55-gallon drums or any other kind of material storage vessel. The types of materials, you'll see a trend with these different rooms. This particular room in that third bullet, it's authorized to use fume hoods, filter presses, or treatment in this area. So those are all the activities that this permit allows Drug and Lab to perform in that particular room. So Jeremy, let's move on to the next room. So DLS2, there's a common trend with these, like I said. This is mainly used as a processing area. The maximum amount of hazardous waste stored in this is 3,300 gallons. And the types of treatment units and activities that can happen in this area: shredders, fume hoods, hammer mills, filter presses, aerosol recovery and recycling methods, solidification methods, stabilization. And so that's the types of activities that are permitted to occur in this area. The next slide, Jeremy. So DLS3, this is right in line in that line as we head north in the building. DLS3 is used both for treatment and storage. You notice there's an increased amount of waste that is permitted for this area, up to 27,500 gallons. And of that, there's 15,000 gallons of tanks. And so in this area, as you can see from the map or the image on the right, those three circles on the upper side, those are 5,000 gallon tanks. And those tanks, they all have the box around that image is actually the secondary containment. And so the state of Michigan requirements are that secondary containment either contains 100% of the largest tank or 10% of the total volume. And this secondary containment area is quite large. And it's the type of thing that when I do inspections on this site, I always look in and make sure that the tanks aren't leaking or there's no evidence of leakage. And it would be clearly visible because these are freestanding stainless steel tanks that I walk around them and make sure that there's no leakage. I also go up on the scaffolding to make sure all the connections to the tank are tight and not leaking. In this area is largely used for a lot of the sorting at Drug and Lab and transferring liquids into these tanks. So the permitted activities in this area are fume hoods, which includes both inorganic and organic fume hoods, shredders, filter presses, distillation methods, neutralization or precipitation methods, metals reclamation, aerosol recovery or recycling methods, conversion methods, or dissolution methods. The next slide, Jeremy. So DLS4, if you notice, it still has tanks too. DLS4 is really just those three tanks. They're identical twins to the other tanks. It's three 5,000 gallon stainless steel tanks. And the only real activity going on here in this area is they store liquid. Next slide, Jeremy. So DLS5, when we get to DLS5, if you remember that first overview of the building is set up almost like a T with the north-south branch. North to south, you have the vertical side of the T, and then off to the left, there's a stem. This is going back to the west. This area is used to store or treat both hazardous and non-hazardous wastes. The total hazardous waste storage in this area is 114,400 gallons. And this is the same grouping of different types of activities that may occur in this area, including fume hoods, both organic and inorganic, shredders, filter presses, distillation methods, neutralization, precipitation, metals reclamation, aerosol recovery and recycling, solidification methods, conversion methods, dissolution methods, and stabilization. The next slide, Jeremy. So this HWLB, this is back at the north end of the building. So that's the hazardous waste loading bay. And so this is the normal type of loading dock like you would see at any other sort of industry or store where a truck can back in and the level of the cargo portion of the truck is at the level where it can be unloaded by a high-low or a skid steer. And wastes are either offloaded or unloaded in this area. This is where Drug and Lab does a lot of their incoming incoming sampling and observation of wastes coming in. They are authorized to store wastes up to 4,020 gallons. There are authorized activities in this area, including fume hoods, shredders, filter presses, metals reclamation, and stabilization methods. Sort of of note in this area too there is containment in this area just in case there is any sort of release. So this area is just a typical loading dock with some emergency release forethought. Next slide, Jeremy. All right, Jeremy, I'm gonna turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. Then we've also got their expansion proposal. So DLD proposes to build new structures and either update or relicense current portions of their facility to be able to manage hazardous waste. And through those activities, they hope to add 3 hazardous waste loading bays, 3 hazardous waste processing and storage areas, 2 hazardous waste storage areas, one of which will be heated and be used in a similar fashion that Wade described about DLS1, a temperature-controlled hazardous waste storage warehouse for the same reason, a bulk storage building, or also known as a tank storage area or tank farm, a rail car loading and storage area, a materials controls enclosure, which will have higher security than the rest of the facility for those higher profile wastes, and then an explosives bunker for the storage of wastes or materials that show the explosive characteristic. So for this next slide and those on the phone, we have a map that depicts both the current facility and the different areas where those expansions are going to be taking place. So I'll try to do my best in describing where those are going to be happening. So to start out, we have phase 1 of the expansion, which is going to be the addition of a 5-stall loading dock that will also have a bay for roll-off containers. This is planned to be constructed on the southwest portion of the facility and share walls with the current DLS5 and the future regulated hazardous waste warehouse. Coming over to phase 2, we've got, the development of the future tank farm. This is planned to have 15 tanks that are all 6,000 gallons, separated out in groups of 3 with similar secondary containment as seen in DLS 3 and 4. This is proposed to be constructed and share walls with DLS 3 and 4, and then also the current maintenance garage. After that, they plan to build the structure that will house an additional loading dock. This is proposed to have 9 stalls, 7 of which will be designated for semis, and then the remaining 2 for cargo trucks. And this structure will also consist of the heated storage warehouse. This is going to be constructed off the eastern side of future tank farm. From here, we move on to phase 4. This will be the construction of a non-heated storage area and then a processing and storage area within the same structure. This will be connected to the phase 3 and phase 2 buildings on its north, and then the current facility on its west, and share walls with DLS 2 and 1. Phase 5 of the expansions will be the construction of the railcar loading area and storage area off the eastern side of the phase 3 expansion. And then we'll be moving back over to the western portion of the current facility with phase 6 and 7. This will be updating and licensing the current portions of the facility to be able to store hazardous waste, as well as the loading bay to also be able to manage hazardous waste. For phase 8, we're moving a bit away from the facility itself to build the materials control enclosure and the explosives bunker. This is for the safety of the employees. The materials controls enclosure is proposed to be built at least 150 feet north of the current westernmost portion of the facility. And then the explosives bunker is proposed to be at least 300 feet away from that same point. And then to wrap up the expansion portion, DLD would like to update this maintenance garage to be used as a heated storage area. So if the expansion is approved and DLD is able to build all of those expansions, they will gain an additional 598,506 gallons of container capacity, and then 90,000 gallons of tank storage capacity as well. So each hazardous waste operating license must follow a strict set of regulations set forth in Part 111. These regulations cover things like the profiling and fingerprinting of hazardous wastes. Profiling being the development of specific waste profiles for each waste stream that is developed by generators and sent to these different treatment, storage, and disposal facilities. This is really for the reassurance of those TSDFs to make sure they can actually manage, or well, are licensed to manage those different wastes that they are receiving, but then also to fingerprint those wastes against them, which fingerprinting is the testing and analysis of those wastes to make sure that they meet the different waste profiles that they have. If a waste is received at the site that does not meet its waste profile, or if the generator processes change, those waste profiles kept at the facility must be updated to match those changes. We also have regulations for the different inspections and their frequencies that must be done at facilities. So a good example for DLD would be inspections of their tanks or containers to make sure they're still structurally sound and can hold the different wastes or treat the different wastes that are being managed in them. There are also requirements for what different trainings and certifications those looking to manage or work with hazardous wastes must receive before they can actually do so. And these regulations cover the specific recertification times and the different continued training and education that must happen as well. There are also regulations for TSDFs to be prepared for and be able to prevent foreseeable issues in management of hazardous wastes. And these cover everything from site security to the different equipment that must be present on the site, and then agreements made with local emergency responders. And kind of going hand in hand with that, each facility must have a contingency plan, which is how they're going to respond to any sort of emergency, such as fires, explosions, or hazardous releases. There are also requirements for the different records that must be kept on the facility, their retention times, and the reports that must be done and their frequency as well. So in terms of different records that must be kept, there's the waste profiles that I mentioned before, the results from the different inspections, the personnel training information and their certifications. And then we also have the environmental monitoring programs that kind of vary from each site to site, but in general, there are the soil monitoring program, the groundwater monitoring program, and ambient air monitoring program. And depending on how the facilities manage their hazardous waste or the different containment structures, they may request waivers for these. So for DLD, they've received waivers for ambient air monitoring and soil monitoring in the past and are requesting those same waivers again in their application. Also, that DLD uses containers, tanks, and miscellaneous units such as filter presses or shredders to manage their hazardous waste. They must meet the specific regulations set forth for each of those management units. So in terms of these, that would be compatibility with the waste that are being stored in them or treated in them, their times of storage, and then also, need a drink of water real quick. Sorry about that. And then also the labeling of these different management units. And that they do treatment at their facility. They must also meet the specific requirements for that treatment. Something these cover is the pre-testing of the treatment methods to ensure that they receive the results that they're going to be used for, and then also that different byproducts, specifically anything that can be dangerous to those working with them, are not created in those treatment processes as well. And that DLD is requesting an expansion. They must meet specific construction conditions. So for any expansion that is approved, they must begin construction or expansion activities within a 3-year period of that initial approval to keep it valid after that 3-year point. And then also after those 3 years, must have continuous expansion activities or construction happening, or basically any work towards those expansions to keep them valid. And those can be available for up to 10 years total. For the renewal and expansion process, they follow the same general timeline, which begins with the submittal of an application. This is generally required at least 180 days before the expiration of the facility's current license. And once that application is received, it's distributed to appropriate agencies or other EGLE divisions besides the materials management division that manages those operating licenses for their review and input. And just a note for appropriate agencies, that refers to like the DNR and EPA. At the same time that application is distributed, the project team begins their completeness review. And this is more of a big picture review to make sure that all the relevant information and sections are there. And normally results in an administrative completeness determination. Once this determination is given to the application, a notice is sent out to the public, local stakeholders and officials, and then also federal officials notifying of that completeness determination, and kicks off the ongoing opportunity for public engagement throughout the renewal and expansion process. Oh, I think actually, sorry, I forgot to mention, we also hold an informational meeting like this one. So that's why we're holding this meeting, and there will be another one later on after the technical review as well. And talking about the technical review, that is what's after the public informational meeting regarding the completeness notice. And this review itself is making sure that all the information within the application meets the statutory requirements and isn't written in such a way that it's hard to be construed or misleading. This review normally results in what we call a technical notice of deficiency, or TNOD. which is a list of comments and requests that the project team has on the application to meet those different statutory requirements or clear up anything that may be kind of fuzzy in it. And also to help out with that, the project team will go to the facility itself, not only to meet with the facility staff, but also to go over different parts of the application, such as the engineering drawings, which can be hard to fully understand in just written form and can be easier in person to see. So after that TNOT is sent, and if the site responds appropriately and updates the application, they are able to receive a technical adequacy determination, which moves the process forward into the development of a draft license. And once that draft license is developed, another public informational meeting and public notice is sent out. But this time there's also a public hearing, which provides those interested in giving comment on that draft license or the facility to add their comments to the official record. In terms of the the public hearing itself, any comments received by Eagle during that will not verbally be responded to, but responded to in the responsiveness summary, which I'll be talking about in a little bit. And that public hearing also kicks, well, not always, but normally kicks off the public comment period, which lasts for 30 days. And any comments received during that public comment period or public hearing are consolidated and responded to in the responsiveness summary, which also includes any project team recommendations on changes to the draft license. And this responsiveness summary and draft license are then sent to the materials management division's management staff and for their final review before a decision is made to approve or deny that draft license. Once a final decision is made, further noticing is sent out to all those who have received notices along the way, and that wraps up the licensing process. So something to note about the both public hearing and formal public comment period is that Eagle is seeking specifically those comments that are considered by statute as significant, and these include technical issues within the renewal application or inconsistencies with rules and statutes that are present at the facility, and then also any impacts the facility may have on the surrounding community or environment. And as an example of how these comments can affect the licensing process, we have an example from past renewal. So concern was expressed that trucks leaving and entering a hazardous waste facility were leaking on the roads. And based on those comments, Eagle had implemented periodic truck inspections by Eagle on-site staff to ensure that this wasn't happening. And then if it was found, proper enforcement actions were taken and the owners of the facility or the transporters were required to clean up the leaked materials. So for DLD's licensing history, they were originally licensed as drug and laboratory disposal in 1999, which was followed by their first renewal application and license in 2012, which is their current license. And that they had a timely submittal of a administratively complete application before the expiration of their current license. They have the ability to continue operating under the current license current license until a final decision is made on their application. And then I'll pass it back to Wade to bring us home with a compliance summary.
So I conduct quarterly inspections at Drug and Lab with the goal of evaluating compliance with license conditions and applicable regulations. Some of the things that I use as tools to keep myself on task with that are there are several checklists that are directly derived from environmental law. And so one of those, I have a permit specific checklist that actually lists each of the different hazardous waste quantities that are permitted to be stored in each area. And so I have a permit specific checklist. I also have a general TSDF. So that's treatment, storage, disposal facility that holds Drug and Lab at the same level and keeps a level landscape for all the TSDFs in Michigan. A TSDF generator or hazardous waste generator checklist, and this is all the waste that is shipped into Drug and Lab. They take ownership of and they're responsible for manifesting off-site to a legitimate disposal facility. I have a TSDF tank, so all the 6 tanks that are on site, those have a special part in the regulation and many requirements, which include inspections and how they're tight and that they're closed adequately. Drug and Lab also manages things that we call universal waste in the state of Michigan. So that would be fluorescent bulbs, consumer electronics, and that sort of waste streams. So there's a large quantity handler checklist for those, and Drug and Lab is also a hazardous waste transporter. In my inspections, I spot check their waste analysis and their manifests. A lot of times I will take a waste stream from the floor, whether it's a drum or tote or a cubic yard box, and I'll find a label and a waste stream and I'll bring it back for my inspection. I ask Drug and Lab staff to explain who shipped the waste to them and how it was originally fingerprinted and what sort of waste analysis they have on this waste stream and how that waste stream will be shipped out to another facility. So Drug and Lab is a hazardous waste transporter. And so part of that transport process is that Drug and Lab has to register annually as a transporter and obtain a permit every 3 years. And part of that process is that they have to have an insurance binder that will cover spills. So it's an MCS 90 binder, and it'll cover at least $1 million per spill. So now off to the fourth bullet. My inspections, they include containers, containment areas, security alarms, record review, waste acceptance, and analysis procedures. So the rhythm of my normal inspection is I make entry. They're always unannounced, so Drug and Lab never knows when I'm coming. I show up. I often bring another inspector with me, whether it be from the hazardous waste section or another RCRA inspector or somebody else in the area for a fresh set of eyes, so that maybe if there's something I'm overlooking, they can see it. The typical rhythm is I announce that I'm there for an inspection. We do an introduction, and then we do a walkthrough of the facility every single time I'm there, where I spot check labels. I spot check that containers are closed and they're not leaking. Everything is secure. I take a look always at the secondary containment areas to make sure that there's no evidence of leakage. After I do my walkthrough, I've usually collected some specimens that are some pictures of labels and waste streams that I want to see documentation, including manifests. Then we do our final meeting, and if I identify any issues, then I communicate that through a violation notice or a compliance communication. Next slide, Jeremy. And so, yeah, the quarterly inspections, if I have a compliance issue, I communicate that through a compliance inspection. I document what I discovered and what's wrong with it. And if necessary, I do a follow-up inspection. If it's something that's significantly wrong, there's a potential for a consent order. And so a consent order is a legal agreement between state of Michigan and Drug and Lab to assure that the problem is resolved. At this time, there are no outstanding violations at Drug and Lab. The facility is currently in compliance. And we have the state of Michigan has the waste data system. It's a database that is accessible by the public to view inspection dates and compliance determinations. Next slide, Jeremy. All right, Jeremy, I'll turn it back over to you.
Alrighty, so to stay connected with different Eagle messages and notifications on this facility, you can subscribe to the electronic update DLD license review list. And then for more information on the application, the current license, and the facility itself, you can check out our website specific to DLD.
All right, Jeremy, you ready for some questions? You guys ready? All right. All right. Thank you both, Jeremy and Wade, for your presentations. It's very good and interesting. So if you have a question tonight, you can put your question in the question box, a Q&A box in Zoom. We'll go through them. You can also click the raise hand icon, and we will call on you and unmute your line if you'd like. If you're on the phone, click a phone caller. If you have a question, you hit #2 on your phone, and that raises your hand, and we'll call on you by your last couple digits of your phone number. So any of those ways you can ask a question. Jeremy, could you go back a slide just to keep that stay connected up there, just in case some people missed it? And want to make sure you all know too that in the chat, Christine put a lot of good information in there, links to pretty much everything that was referenced by Jeremy or Wade, and then some additional information too, including a link to this website that we're referencing here. And on that website, I want to remind you all that there's a place you can go to stay up to date. So you can subscribe to stay up to date on what's going on. So in the process and when opportunities for public comment come up. Okay, so let's take a look at the questions, and we do have quite a few questions in here on, I guess, emergency planning. One of them relates to, they're talking about a fire at the facility, and the fire at the facility showed the need for a comprehensive hazmat safety plan, and what has been done to correct that problem. So I don't know, Wade or Jeremy, when you guys want to weigh in on that?
I don't have that specific information on me right now, but can follow up once I do.
Yeah.
Unless there's anyone else on the project team that knows that information off the top of their head.
So their current contingency plan and quick reference guide has been updated. Like anything, it's the emergency that happened at that time was not ideal, but the contingency plan and quick reference guide have been designed to address those issues with all the appropriate phone numbers and processes. The building was updated with improvements to address potential spills and emergencies like that fire.
Yeah, they're also asking, what type of spill prevention plan is in place and what type of hazmat spill plan is in place. So how would you talk about that as part of this permit and, expansion? I mean, is there a spill prevention plan? Is there a hazmat spill plan?
That some of this borders with, their plan for fires. I know they installed a new fire suppression system from the last time, and that was part of their moving forward as a better facility. And I'm not sure with this exact license, the requirements in licensing world, but the site has secondary containment so that if there is a release, it'll be caught by the secondary containment.
Yeah, and something too to note, the project team is starting their technical review, and in that process, so if any of these things aren't actually specifically called out in the license, those will be asked for in the technical notice of deficiency.
Okay, so I'm assuming it's probably the same person they're asking, who can access those plans, and can the public look at them? I mean, how, as part of this, review process, if somebody wants to make a comment on this permit, is there a way to look at the plans, or how do you access that? Can anybody access it?
Yeah, so those should be part of their application, which we've got online
Okay.
at the website here. And then also in terms of our different information repositories, such as the Lansing District Office or the actual district office where the facility is located. And then we also have a local library nearby the facility as well that has all that information.
Okay, so if someone goes out on that website and maybe has trouble looking or finding anything on there, I'm assuming they can contact you, Jeremy, or contact information is
Yep.
up there. Okay.
Yeah, and we can go back to the contact information slide too,
Sure.
if anyone wants
Go
that.
ahead. Yep.
Um,
Great.
We actually, I think, have one. Yep, right here.
Great. Yes, that's what I was thinking about. Yeah, and another related question to all this is, who writes the hazmat spill plan, or the plans for this, the safety plans? Is it some of the facilities? Do they have a contractor write them? How's that work? Do you know?
I don't specifically know. No, I may reach out to Rich if he has any input.
Hey, Jeremy. In the case with Drug and Lab, DLD, they could do their own, or if they don't have the expertise in house, they would go through a contractor.
Okay.
But facility would submit the first round to us, and then we'd review and correct that if necessary by commenting on it.
Okay, good. Just wrapping up, not very many more questions here in the queue. So if you do have a question, please send it in to us. Question here about terminology you guys used. Both of you used the term fingerprinted the waste. What does that mean when you say fingerprinted waste? Can you explain that?
Yeah, so fingerprinting is the process of testing and analyzing the waste, normally done when a waste originally shows up at a TSDF. And that's really done to ensure that it either meets the profile or they know that it's is specifically different from the profile, which would result in that waste profile that's kept at the facility needing to be updated.
So when you're saying these, mean we're checking to make sure that what they're receiving is what they're allowed to accept, or?
Not only that, but also that it matches what the generators say it is.
Okay, so that's how they check it. They double check it by fingerprinting. Okay. Are there any restrictions on what type of waste they can receive or from where?
Don't specifically know the answer to that one. I know in this application, they are requesting the ability to manage all recognized hazardous waste.
Okay, but there's no restrictions in the permit that would say it.
Not specifically unless they are denied that ability.
Okay.
So-
Rich, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I'll expand on it. There is a waste codes that they're allowed to accept, and I think that's what Jeremy is trying to allude to. There's a list of those that are part of the application. We review those. If they don't have a specific waste code that's in the permit or the license, then they're not allowed to take it. There are some other things that they call out. Sometimes we call out things like incompatibles or something like that will specifically say in the license. But most of the time, it's all about what's in the waste code system. And as far as where they can come from, they can come from anywhere. There are no restrictions. We do not stop waste coming from out of state. are coming into the state or leaving the state for that matter. Interstate commerce is not something that we get to control through the licensing process.
Oh, thanks, Rich, for clarifying that. It was brought up about secondary containment in your overview of facility. When they're expanding their operation, do they also expand their secondary containment, or how is secondary containment addressed? And could you explain what secondary containment is?
So in terms of the expansion itself and secondary containment, so in terms of secondary containment, it's unit specific. So like for the tanks, if you could see in like DLS 3 and 4, they're basically surrounded by another wall, and that area itself is for like catching any sort of spills and keeping it from getting to the environment, which that's pretty much the whole purpose of secondary containment. It's containment outside of management units such as tanks or containers to ensure that no hazardous waste releases to the environment happen. And for the expansion itself, that it is a unit by unit thing. Each unit would have its own secondary containment. That's something that I actually forgot to mention in the expansion slides, is that each proposed new unit is also proposed to have adequate secondary containment for those containment capacities. And so like I was talking about with the new tank farm, the groups of 3 tanks that will be separated out will all have their own secondary containments. And yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's good. I think that's what we're getting at with that question, was about making sure that's part of the review of more secondary containment. I think one last question here for Wade, probably since Wade's inspector, and that's what if you find a violation? So if you're doing an inspection, what if you find a violation there? I don't know if Wade's still on or not. Maybe there he is. Okay.
So yeah, if I find a violation, the first thing I do is take a picture of it, because I wanted to have documentation of what the violation is, whether that be records review, something on a manifest, or whether that be something physical. Like, for example, if it was a drum that wasn't labeled properly. And so if I find a violation, I take a picture so that I have evidence, and I'll let the site know. I'll let Drug and Lab know that this is a violation, and I send them a letter that says what the violation is. I have the rule citation so they know where they can look. And the way our inspections are typically established is, if it's a minor violation, then they fix the violation. They provide documentation either in a picture or while I'm there that violation has been resolved to my satisfaction. And then I return them to compliance. So I send them a letter that says you have one. And if they fix it, then I send them another letter that says you fixed it. And,
okay.
and the degree of penalty is dependent upon the severity of the violation. So
right.
Label would be just a return to compliance. If it was something more serious, then we would go into more like penalties.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Wade, for explaining that. Appreciate it. Okay, that looks like wraps up the questions we have for tonight. Just checking in with Jeremy or Wade, see if you guys got any kind of, I guess, parting remarks or anything you want to chime in about.
Nothing specifically, just thanks for joining us. And once again, please feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions.
Excellent. And I want to thank Jeremy and Wade for both being on, and Rich too for chiming in a couple of those questions. Good presentation. I want to remind everybody that we did record tonight's presentation, and we will send everyone who registered, even if they didn't attend, a link to the recording so they can watch it later if they want to. We'll also post it on our YouTube channel. You can find it up there in a couple more days. Lots of good information in the chat. If you missed that information, don't worry. We'll be following up with an email. We're going to put a lot of this information right in there. So you have the links with you, as well as our contact information that we shared as well. So thank you all for being on tonight, spending some time with us to learn about this facility and asking good questions. I hope you have a great rest of your evening. Thank you.